we have an opportunity in our community to unite a number of different agencies within our greater Harrisburg area. And of course, part of our connection with IMC is the MLK Leadership Institute. Also, the labor unions are very significant to us in our cause for justice here in Harrisburg. I just want to send out a shout out right now for ASME and the cooperation we've had to be able to utilize a facility like this. Can we just give a praise? And so we have on our program greetings from Mr. Darren Spann, who is the assistant to the executive director of ASME Council 13. Mr. Spann.
Good morning. Good morning. First, I'm going to start by saying that I'm going to make a promise to all of you. The same promise that Elizabeth Taylor made to each of her 9 husbands. I'm not going to keep you very long. So, good morning. Again, I'm Darren Spann from ASME Council 13, and I want to bring greetings from our 65,000 members and our executive director, David Philman. As you all know, more than 50 years ago, Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King was assassinated in Memphis, Tennessee. Dr. King was in Memphis, Tennessee to try to bring a stop to the sanitation workers' strike. The sanitation workers were members of ASME, Local 1733. So Dr. King and ASME both are about bringing dignity and respect to all workers. So we want to again welcome you to the House of Labor and say thank you for bringing your event to ASME, and we hope that you have a great event. Thank you.
So we have a young man today that's going to bring a solo instrumental. His name is Isaiah Garfield.
Praise the Lord.
He made it all way. He made it all way. Standing here, not knowing how I'll get through this test. Holding on to faith you know best. we can win. Wrap us in your arms and step in. And everything we need you supply. 'Cause you, God, is in control. And now we know that you made a way. When our backs were against the wall and as if it was over, you made a way. Now we're standing here only because, Lord, you made a way.
It's really an honor to introduce our speaker today, the Honorable Royce Leon L. Morris, Judge of Dauphin County Court of Common Pleas. He was sworn in January 2nd, 2018. Judge Morris was born in Nassauwattix, Virginia. That's the Eastern Shore, Virginia. And he was raised in Robbinsville, New Jersey, before moving to Harrisburg area in 1991. He is a graduate of Temple University with a Bachelor's of Arts in Political Science. He received his Juris Doctorate from the University of Maryland. He also completed an intensive trial program at the National Criminal Defense College at Mercer Law School in Macon, Georgia. He began working for the Dauphin County Public Defender's Office in 1991 and was a chief deputy in the office from 1996 to 1999. In 1999, George Morris left the public defender's office to join the law firm of Goldberg, Katzman, and was elevated to partner in 2002. Before leaving the firm to join the bench, Judge Morris focused his practice on representing individuals and corporations in criminal and civil matters, gaining extensive trial experience in both state and federal courts. Throughout his legal career, Judge Morris represented municipal and governmental entities as solicitor and general counsel, often litigating complex and politically sensitive matters on behalf of those clients. As an attorney, Judge Morris was listed as a member of the National Trial Lawyers Top 100 and the National Black Lawyers Top 100. Come on, y'all. He was also named the Pennsylvania Super Lawyer by the Philadelphia Magazine consecutively from 2008 to 2017. He didn't want me to read this whole thing, but this is really powerful, y'all. Judge Morris was also AV rated as preeminent by his peers at Martindale-Hubbell. He received the Alan J. Jostle Advocacy Award, which is the highest award given by the Pennsylvania Association of Criminal Defense Lawyers for his pro bono representation, which led to the exoneration and release after 16 years of an individual sentenced to life in prison. That's pretty impressive. Oh, yeah. Judge Morris was a frequent lecturer in continuing legal education seminars for the Pennsylvania Bar Institute, the Pennsylvania Association of Criminal Defense Lawyers, and many other local and national continuing legal education programs. He also taught criminal law and criminal evidence at Harrisburg Community College for over 10 years between 1994 and 2005. From 2008 to 2009, he served as president of the Pennsylvania Association of Criminal Defense Lawyers, having previously served that organization as vice president and treasurer. Judge Morris served on the Pennsylvania Commission on Sentencing from 2011 through 2015. He also served on the Pennsylvania Bar Association Task Force on the Code of Judicial Conduct. Judge Morris served on the House of Delegates for the Pennsylvania Bar Association and chaired the Equal Professional Opportunity Committee for the Dauphin County Bar Association and the Capital Area Managing Partners Diversity Initiative. Judge Morris is very involved in his community, having served on numerous nonprofit boards and commissions. He volunteered his time for nonprofits as a youth sports coach, scout leader, and youth mentor. In 2016, he received the Mayor's Award for Distinguished Public Service. Judge Morris is married to Dr. Celeste Morris. Amen. And they have 2 children, and Royce and Christian. And what I want to say is all of this is wonderful, but Judge Morris is also a man of God. He is an amazing human being. He is someone I am proud to call brother and friend, and he really does believe that God called him to a role to really, really rule and judge righteously, and that is the most impressive thing that I can say about him.
They do that in court, but first of all, I want to say good morning. It's an honor to celebrate Dr. Martin Luther King with you all. I want to thank Pastor Coleman and the IMC. I want to thank Organized Labor and AFSCME for continuing to support social justice and civil rights. And I want to thank all you folks for being here. I made a promise to my brothers back there from the Nativity School, so we'll honor that promise. I'm glad that you're here. In fact, I'm 400 trillion times as excited about this event. Now that number has significance. So young folks back there, I have a gift for you, a prize, if you can tell me what 400 trillion, what the significance of that is. I told you to think about it first. If somebody has an answer, you give it to me. If not, I'll let you use your cell phone. How many stars? Good guess. All right, what's the answer? It was hard? That was hard? What's the answer?
It was talking about that there's you can be born out of 400 trillion times.
Yes.
You got it. All right. We're all miracles in this room. The chance of you being born is 1 in 400 trillion. And I'm not going to go into the biology of it, but those are the odds that you have of being born. And if you think about that, we're all miracles sitting in here today. And God ordained you for this day, for this purpose, to be in this place at this time. So we need to celebrate that. And what I have for you, young man, I want you to open it here because we're talking about Dr. Martin Luther King. And I'm going to, it's a testament of hope. The essential writings, that's all. And while you're up here, let me tell you about that book. That book changed my life. The essential writings and speeches of Martin Luther King, I didn't live, I know I look old, but I didn't live through most of that time. But it transformed my life. So I hope you'll take that, share it with your classmates, read those essential writings, and they'll change your life as well. All right. Today I want to talk about the transformative power of mentoring through the life of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Today we celebrate his life because of his influence on American life and how profound that was. We build monuments to him, and we'll celebrate his national holiday, hopefully with a day of service on Monday. He died too soon at 39. Many of us were still finding ourselves at 39, and I know I was, and my wife would probably give me an amen on that. But at 26 years of age, with the Montgomery bus boycott, Dr. King emerged as a leader of the civil rights movement, as we know it. It was an accident that by the time of his death, he had systematically helped to dismantle segregation and push a reluctant nation towards equal rights for its African American citizens. So much of what we know about his life and his movement came from his own words. my wife over there, Dr. Celeste Morris, when I was preparing for this. I give her a shout out. She worked hard for that doctorate. So she suggested that I share some of his words with you because it's so often we can forget how profound and prolific he was. We all remember, and we were probably taught this in school, hopefully, about August 1963, when he took the steps at the Lincoln Memorial and told us about a dream deeply rooted in the American dream. We hold these truths to be self-evident that all men are created equal. And he told America on that day, in a sense, we've come to our nation's capital to cash a check. When the architects of our republic wrote the magnificent words of the Constitution and the Declaration of Independence, they were signing a promissory note to which every American was to fall heir. This note was a promise that all men, yes, black men, as well as white men, would be guaranteed the unalienable rights of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. It's obvious today that America has defaulted on this promissory note insofar as her citizens of color are concerned. Instead of honoring this sacred obligation, America has given the Negro people a bad check. And the check is marked insufficient funds. And there are so many great quotes that come out of that speech. But oftentimes, that's as far as they go in our American education system. They tell us about the dream that he had. So some of you may remember that in March of 1963, on the steps of the state capitol in Montgomery, Alabama, after the march in Selma, after the Bloody Sunday incident that was portrayed in the movie Selma on the Edmund Pettus Bridge, he was there and he cried out about injustice, and he said, "I've come to you this afternoon, however difficult the moment, however frustrating the hour, it will not be long, because truth crushed to the earth will rise again. How long? Not long, because no lie can live forever. How long? Not long, because you reap what you sow. How long? Not long, because the arc of the moral universe is long, but it bends towards justice." Some may even remember or were taught about his final speech in April of 1968 in a church full of striking sanitation workers, as we've heard, where he told a crowd in gut-wrenching transparency, "Well, I don't know what will happen now. We've got some difficult days ahead, but it really doesn't matter to me now, because I've been to the mountaintop, and I've seen the promised land. I may not get there with you, but I want you to know tonight that we as a people will get to the promised land." Few of us will remember his sermon at the Temple Israel in Hollywood in February of 1965. There he described a great nation as a compassionate nation that takes care of its populace, the least of these, as he called them. And he went on to say, who are the least of these? The least of these are those who find themselves smothering in an airtight cage of poverty in an affluent society. Who are the least of these? They are thousands of individuals who see life as a long, desolate corridor with no exit sign. Who are the least of these? The little boys and little girls who grow up with clouds of inferiority floating in their mental skies because they know they are caught in conditions of economic depravity. Who are the least of these? They are individuals caught in the fatigue of despair. And somehow, if we are to be a great nation, we must be concerned for the least of these, our brothers. Few of us will remember or were taught about his address at Stanford University in April of 1967, where he advocated for economic and social equality and told us about the other America. He told them on that day, there's one America. One America is beautiful. Millions of young people grow up in the sunlight of opportunity, but tragically and unfortunately, there is another America. The other America has a daily ugliness about it that constantly transforms the ebullience of hope into the fatigue of despair. They find themselves on a lonely island of poverty in the midst of a vast ocean of material prosperity. He went on from there in a now famous refrain, and he said, "We shall overcome, because Carlyle is right. No lie can live forever. We shall overcome, because William Cullen Bryant is right. Truth crushed to the earth will rise again. We shall overcome, because James Russell Lowell is right. Truth forever on the scaffold, wrong forever on the throne. We shall overcome because the Bible is right. You reap what you sow. With this faith, we will be able to hew out of the mountain of despair a stone of hope. With this faith, we will be able to transform the jangling discords of our nation into a beautiful, beautiful symphony of brotherhood. Fewer have heard of his address in April of 1967 in the Riverside Church in New York City, in one of the most controversial speeches that he ever gave in opposition to the Vietnam War. And he said, "We are taking the young black men who have been crippled by our society and sending them 8,000 miles away to guarantee liberties in Southeast Asia, which they are not found in Southwest Georgia or East Harlem." Maybe even few of us will remember one of my favorite addresses of Dr. Martin Luther King at the New Covenant Baptist Church in Chicago, Illinois in 1967, where he talked about the three dimensions of a complete life, where he described the holy city, the New Jerusalem, that John saw on a lonely island of Patmos. He said one of the greatest glories of this city of God that John saw was its completeness. The length, the breadth, and the height are equal. He described the length of life as the inward concern for one's own welfare. The breadth of life is the outward concern for the welfare of others. And it was here where King takes us on a vivid journey from Jerusalem down to Jericho. And he tells us the parable of the Good Samaritan. And he calls out the priest and the Levite for passing by their beaten and bloodied countrymen. And he suggests their fear kept them from getting involved. And he commends the Samaritan for helping a person of another race. And he said, the first question the Levite asked was, if I stop to help this man, what will happen to me? But the Good Samaritan came by and reversed the question. Not what will happen to me if I stop to help this man, but what will happen to this man if I do not stop to help him. He went on to describe the height of life as the upward reach to God. The am that I am. He said a few theologians are trying to say that God is dead. And I've been asking them about it because it disturbs me to know that God died and I didn't have a chance to attend the funeral. They haven't been able to tell me the date of his death. They haven't been able to tell me yet who the coroner was that pronounced him dead. They haven't been able to tell me yet where he's buried. And he concludes by saying, we should search for him. We were made for God, and we will be restless until we find rest in him. And I say to you this morning that this is the personal faith that has kept me going. And he was murdered less than a year after that speech. Those are some very profound words, words that carried me, words that nurtured me, words that fed me and put my drive in me. But as profound and prolific as they were, they changed hearts and minds, they helped dismantle segregation. Those words came from somewhere. So I stopped by to ask this question, where did they come from? How did he get to be the man to lead the movement at 26 years old? How did he get there? And I'm not asking where he came from. We all know he was born in Atlanta, Georgia, in the area of Sweet Auburn, as they call it. Celeste and I visited there last summer. I'm talking about the spirit that gave him the will to give so much of himself, so much of his life to the movement, while other young men his age were doing what young men do. You know, all right? He was leading a social justice revolution. He espoused nonviolent resistance and modeled it after Mahatma Gandhi's movement in India, but he never met Gandhi. And the truth is, it was the mentors in his life that led him on the path that marked his future and ours. It demonstrates the sovereignty of God and how he is always working behind the scenes. Martin Luther King Sr., a Baptist preacher who was formerly named Michael King, changed his name eventually and his son's name to Martin Luther after the great Protestant reformer. His father was a Morehouse graduate. Any Morehouse graduates in the house? All right, none. All right, you can claim them from UVA. We'll just claim them. But his father sent the bright young Martin, 15-year-old, off to Morehouse as well. And no doubt, Martin Sr. mentored his son. And because of his connections to Morehouse, the promising Martin was also mentored by Benjamin Mays, then the president at Morehouse. Mays, he was also a political activist in Atlanta, and he was chiding at that time the black church for their apathy and criticized them for their focus on the hereafter and not the here and now. He had young Martin's ear, and when King graduated from Morehouse, he entered seminary at the Crozier Theological Seminary in Chester, PA, with the encouragement of Mays and his father. It was there that he became familiar with Gandhi's philosophy on nonviolence. He earned his divinity degree and went on to Boston University to continue his theological studies. It was there that he met his wife, Coretta, and nothing motivates you more than a good woman, you know that. But he also met there a man by the name of Howard Thurman, who was the dean of the Marsh Chapel at Boston University. Thurman was the first black dean of chapel at a majority white university. Thurman had traveled broadly heading Christian missions. Thurman met Gandhi during one of his missions in India. He asked Gandhi what should he take back to America about his movement. Gandhi remarked that he regretted that nonviolence was not a more visible practice worldwide. And he said to Thurman prophetically, "It may be through the Negroes that the unadulterated message of nonviolence will be delivered to the world." So, showing God's strategic plan, Thurman was King Sr.'s classmate and good friend at Morehouse. And Thurman was also the valedictorian of the class. So King Sr. asked Thurman to take a special interest in Martin, and he mentored Martin. Thurman was a prolific writer, writing more than 20 books. The most famous of his books was Jesus and the Disinherited. And Mayor Papensus is going to order that for his store, so you'll be able to pick that up very soon. But this book deeply influenced Martin Luther King Jr. and many other religious leaders. Thurman's mentoring helped shape what would become the civil rights movement. So it was this process that allowed Martin Luther King Jr. to become the leader, the most important leader of the 20th century. But along the way, there were significant mentors who, without their contributions, his significant works may not have occurred. Why is this important for us today? Why am I spending so much time talking about it? Because we owe it to the young people that are coming behind us to be those mentors that they need. Generation X, as they'll be called, and Generation Alpha, which is to come, those born after 2012, they need us to make them pick up their heads from their iPhones and their iPads and share our experiences with them, to teach them and mentor them. Our children have so many people influencing them today. I was listening to the news today, and many of you may know this, but Beyonce dropped her new line for Adidas. You don't know that? Well, a lot of young people do because it's sold out in one day. There are many folks out there who influence our young people. We call them social media influencers. They influence them on what they're going to buy, how they're going to look, the way they're going to dress. The mainstream media also tries to influence them. And you can go to the poorest cities or the wealthiest suburbs, and you'll find someone who will negatively influence our children. I suggest that we want to influence that coming generation, but we also want to have an impact on that generation. Dr. King had great influence, but he also had great impact. He had a national voice, but he found himself constantly on the ground in the struggle with people. He encountered the hoses and the dogs. He went to jail with them. He impacted thousands of young people throughout the struggle by standing shoulder to shoulder with them. But he was mentored well. Impact, that's what we want to have. Impact is when you allow your world to collide with that other person's world, not in a violent way that leaves the other person bewildered or confused, but in a way that transforms and fulfills them. Helping someone in a way that gives them a sense of connectedness, happiness, fulfillment, and meaning. Dr. King Sr. must have feared for his son many times, but he had to feel great pride and fulfillment for the mentoring and the seeds that he had sown. Benjamin Mays and Howard Thurman must have felt like the second and third runners in the 4x100 relay as they watched a young Martin Luther King Jr. carry the baton to the finish line of what they've started. This world is broken, and these times are difficult and confusing for our young people. But as believers, we know that there's a final fix coming, and that's when the Savior cracks the sky. But as Benjamin Mays said, we need to concern ourselves with the here and now and let God be concerned about the hereafter. By the year 2030, there will be 80 million children under the age of 18, and more than half of those children will be of color. Homicide is still a leading cause of death for African Americans between the ages of 10 and 24. Suicides are up while crime is down. There's a generation at risk. I see them every day in juvenile court and family court. All they need is someone to mentor them, someone to come alongside them and let them know that they matter, to have an impact, to let your world collide with theirs, to let them know that they are all that the greatest of men have had. George Washington Carver, his favorite poem was from Edgar Guest, and this is what it says, in part: you've got all that the greatest of men have had, 2 arms, 2 hands, 2 legs, 2 eyes, and a brain to use if you would be wise. With this equipment they all began, so start from the top and say I can. He ends the poem with, the courage must come from the soul within, the man must furnish the will to win. So figure it out for yourself, my lad. You were born with all the greatest have had. We need to tell our kids about that they have the equipment to be successful. They need to hear it from you that they can do anything they set their minds to. We can't sit far off and do great things and seek recognition and influence behavior. They need us to get face to face. Dr. King had a great impact because he was willing to go face to face and touch hurting and desperate people. And in Memphis, we know that led to his death. But his voice echoes through time that if a man hasn't found something he's willing to die for, he's not fit to live. Finally, one thing I noticed about Dr. Martin Luther King, too, and I encourage you to look at this, he rarely had a sermon that was more than 40 minutes. In fact, most of them were around 25 to 30 minutes. Look them up. That's good preaching. In October of 1967, 6 months before his death, King addressed the students at the Barrett Junior High School in Philadelphia and asked them this question: what is your life's blueprint? He told the students that number one in their life's blueprint should be a deep belief in your own dignity, your own worth, and your own somebodyness. And I say that to the young men back there from the Nativity School. Don't allow anybody to make you feel you're nobody. Always feel that you count. Always feel that you have worth, and always feel that your life has ultimate significance. And he went on to tell them, and when you discover what you will be in life, set out to do it as if God Almighty called you to this particular moment in history to do it. Don't set out to do a good job. Set out to do such a good job that the living, the dead, the unborn could not do it better. If it falls to your lot to be a street sweeper, sweep streets like Michelangelo painted pictures. Sweep streets like Beethoven composed music. Sweep streets like Leontyne Price sings before the Metropolitan Opera. Sweep streets like Shakespeare wrote poetry. Sweep streets so well that all the host of heaven and earth will have to pause and say, here lived a great street sweeper who swept his job well. If you can't be a pine at the top of the hill, be a shrub in the valley, but be the best little shrub on the side of a hill. Be a bush if you can't be a tree. If you can't be a highway, just be a trail. If you can't be the sun, be a star. For it isn't by the size that you win or you fail. Be the best at whatever you are. He had a way of bringing the message home, didn't he? And that's what we need to say to our children. So this is a call to you to get up, to make those young people look up so that you can mentor, teach, and guide them. So I will conclude with this. The next generation needs moments over movements. There will be no great movement to transform lives if we are not willing to share our moments with them and mentor and teach them. So much of our history and the history of the struggle has been lost because we haven't shared it. And they need to hear it. Yes, there is transformative power in mentoring. From a 15-year-old boy to the leader of a movement. We know how he got there now, and we're the beneficiaries of it. So we need to thank Dr. King Sr. We need to thank Benjamin Mays. We need to thank Howard Thurman, because they took the steps to take that young boy to the man who gave us many of the freedoms we deserve, that we earn today. Mentors don't always see the limelight. And these mentors, I don't think they would have wanted the burden that came with the limelight that Dr. King had. Dr. King's life, however, demonstrates that the process of mentoring, when done right, can change the world. Jesus mentored 12 brothers from all different walks of life. He lost one along the way, but the others went on to spread the gospel and change the world. Let's mentor the next generation of world changers. Thank you, and God bless you.
Letting us know the importance of mentoring, that Martin Luther King Jr. had some mentors in his life that greatly influenced him, so that we know, and he challenged each of us to mentor some people. Thank you, Judge Morris. Awesome, Judge Morris. Awesome address. Come on, give the Lord another hand clap. At this time, we're going to turn it over to our awards portion of the ceremony, and Bishop Vernal Sims Jr., Sr. is coming at this time.
Good morning. We would like to spend just a second or two. We have men and women in our community who are, in fact, unsung heroes. And so we want to honor them today. Our first honoree Joe, come on up. Our first honoree is Reverend Dr. W. Braxton Cooley, Sr. On behalf of the IMC, we present this to you instead of Dr. Cooley, and we send him our blessings.
Amen.
I was asked just to come up here for a very brief moment, just to say this award, the ministerium is presenting this award to Dr. Cooley, who can't be with us today because of illness, etc. But he has been a champion in our community for many years. And he was a pastor in this community for many years, and now he's in retirement. You might say he's a lion in winter, but he is still a mighty man of God and has done some tremendous things. And Dr. King often said that if you can straighten up your back, no one can ride your back if you straighten up, right? And that was the kind of man Dr. Cooley was. He was a man of keen intellect as well as spine. And so he would go up against 20 years ago when the ministerium was contending with the Harrisburg International Airport over their lack of minority participation. It was Dr. Cooley and the IMC who were leading that fight to try and bring about some equity for our local minority firms in this community. And that was not a small task at all. In the same vein with Hershey, I mean, I'm naming some of the giant companies in our community that Dr. Cooley would contend with and say you must do the right thing and be fair. And so that's the kind of man that he was and is, and that's the kind of work he did to try to make this community better. And so that's why now this IMC is now today recognizing again, he's been recognized many times before, but recognizing again the great work and the legacy of this civil rights leader, this champion for justice in our community, the Reverend W. Braxton Cooley.
This next award is on behalf of Pastor Carl E. Hines Jr., and his legacy continues to live on, and his son is coming to accept this award.
Amen. As a recipient of this award, Pastor Hines, he was one of my mentors, and so as I stand in to tell about the life of Pastor Hines, what an awesome man he was in the civil rights movement and advancing the kingdom of God, and what he has done in the Harrisburg area. A lot of times we have unsung heroes in the midst of us. He has gone on to be with the Lord, but he left an impact in the city that resonates throughout the city for generations upon generations. And so that's why I decided to honor him and his legacy, because he was my friend. He was a father to me. And most of all, he was my pastor.
So we present this to you on behalf of the IMC. As you know, Pastor Hines he is the reason that my husband has become the godly man that he is. And so we honor his memory and everything that made him great in this world, not just in this city. So this is his son accepting on his behalf. So we thank God for
And as King's movement started in Atlanta, he honored the sanitation workers. And so as the president of the IMC, I was laying in my bed one night, and God spoke to me and said, Dwayne, all this stuff that we do got to go back to the beginning of where King started. And so I talked to my wife about it, and we prayed about it, and he said, go back and honor the sanitation workers. And so it's funny how God begins to speak to you when you are in the right place at the right time to download information that lets you know that the steps of a good man are ordered by the Lord. And so I called my friend Dave and Aaron Johnson, and I said, hey man, how y'all like being honored? And they said, Pastor, whatever you want, we're going to do what you want. So I called the mayor, and I said, hey mayor, I'd like to meet with you. And we met and we talked, and he said, Pastor Dwayne, I'm there for you. He said, I want to partner with you, and I want to make sure that the city's vision gets pushed ahead. And he said, whatever you need me to do, I'll be there. And so I introduce to some and present to others our fine mayor, Eric Pappenfuss, as he talks about Aaron and Dave Johnson.
Thank you. Thank you all. Thank you to both Pastors Coleman. This is a wonderful event. I appreciate the invite, and I'm going to get to talk a little bit about two of my favorite people in the whole world. I can't think of any two individuals who are more deserving of an Unsung Hero Award. As a matter of fact, I just received a text from Aaron Johnson telling us all that salt trucks are out in all 8 areas of the city. It's true. They know the freezing rain is going to be coming this afternoon, and they're out there making sure that our rides home from this event are going to be safe. So rather than come and take the award in person, they're out there working for us, and what a great example that is. Just, if I could reference history a little bit and talk to you about why these two individuals have done so much. I want to put it in the context of 52 years ago. Let's go back to Memphis. Let's go back to Martin Luther King coming to Memphis to support the sanitation workers in that city. He was there fighting for safer working conditions. 2 sanitation workers had actually been crushed to death in a compactor. He was there to fight for better wages. He was there to fight for recognition of ASME as their union. And it was a tough fight. There were marches, there were protests, there were a lot of people that made a lot of sacrifices. And unfortunately, the mayor of Memphis at that time really represented the worst of our society, opposing these marches. He used tear gas, he used dogs, he even hired all white replacement sanitation workers to take the jobs, and refused to give in. And unfortunately, it wasn't even until after Martin Luther King was murdered that both sides came to the same table and asked me to receive the recognition for those workers, and a new contract was passed and progress was made. But it was a tough struggle and a tough fight. And I want to zoom that forward to Harrisburg in 2013 when I was first elected and first taking office. You may know the city was practically gone bankrupt. There was a catastrophe at the Harrisburg Incinerator. The state had taken over. We were in receivership, so there was no local control at all. And who was getting blamed for this problem? It was the sanitation workers. It was those hardworking unsung heroes that apparently had too good a pension, or were making too high a wage, or were causing the city's financial problems. This is what I was hearing when I took office. It wasn't the corrupt consultants that had recommended these improvements. It wasn't others that had pocketed millions of dollars. But the focus was on, unfortunately, the word was privatization and downsizing. If you couldn't defeat ASME, well, then you could just eliminate ASME. You could just replace it and privatize it. So when I took office in 2013, we had sold our public works facility. We had hundreds of workers and nowhere to put them because it had been sold to Laxwama. And we had an eviction notice from the incinerator, and we had to be out of there in 3 months with no place to go. We also had a contract with Republic Services to take over sanitation for the city. And happily, we opposed that contract. It was defeated by City Council in a joint effort. And it was one of the first things that we did. And the other first thing that I did was I needed to look for new leadership for that department. There was a public works director that had been appointed, and there had been a series of public works directors that had come from outside the community. Let's just put it that way. They'd been recruited from far and away, and they were all in favor of privatization. They were all in favor of sort of letting sanitation fall apart to the point where privatization would be inevitable. And I took the step, first month in office, of saying we're going to appoint Aaron Johnson as the new director of Public Works, and we're going to appoint David West as his deputy. And this was something of maybe a bit of a surprise. Some of you know that Aaron Johnson had just run against me for mayor. But I believed in his passion for this city. I believed that he could turn it around, and I put him in that position of authority, and we put Dave West in his second in command. And together, from that moment, we rejected the privatization. We hired some consultants and others who would help make the case for why the Public Works Department needed to be invested in, not taken apart because it did so much for this city. We did, for the first time, our first borrowings in the city. Here we were in bankruptcy, trying to come out of our first borrowings. We bought all new trash trucks for the sanitation department. We invested in equipment like we'd never invested in before. We began to actually grow the department's workforce. We did a citywide audit. We established new working conditions. We established new containers. We systematized that. The new containers allowed us to bring in additional revenues, but they were also better for the workers because they worked with electronic lifts, so it saved wear and tear on their backs. We did other things. We increased recycling in the city of Harrisburg. Just as short a time ago as 2013, we weren't recycling anything in the city of Harrisburg. Now, we've more than tripled our recycling rates in the city of Harrisburg. We're working towards composting. It's been a very, very big success story. It's amazing. The other thing that they did was they said, and this was an Aaron Johnson and Dave West recommendation, they said, Mayor, we don't need private contractors in our city. We don't need the Penn Waste and the Republics coming in and servicing these larger commercial accounts. We can do it ourselves. And we negotiated with all of the major trash companies at the time to have them leave the city and to have city services take over those accounts. That brought additional revenue in, which again allowed us to build up the number of workers in our city. That was unheard of to allow that to happen. And we brought things back to the point where when our neighboring municipality, Steelton, just this past year was having trouble with its privatized sanitation force, they came to Harrisburg and they said, we like what you do, we want to partner with you. And we have an intermunicipal agreement with the borough of Steelton to handle their trash services, and we're able to do it on a regional basis. This is largely because of two completely unsung heroes that have been working their whole career. Both Aaron and Dave started over 25 years ago in the sanitation department, getting up at 3 a.m., picking up your trash, riding the trash trucks. And they have risen slowly over the course of those 25 years into the very top positions of leadership in the department. That is a success story. They are role models for everyone who works in this city. They are part of all the progress that we're making in Harrisburg, and they deserve this recognition today. So on their behalf, and on behalf of the city of Harrisburg, I am here to very happily recognize Aaron Johnson and David West. Thank you.
Good morning. How's everybody doing? So I'm here to talk about two people that I felt that was important to recognize, and I don't see, doesn't seem like they were able to make it. But the first person that I wanted to recognize and I thought was important is Miss Janine Peterson, who is the head of the Hamilton Health Center. And I go back a few years here in Harrisburg, and I remember when Hamilton Health Center was a very modest place in uptown Harrisburg that was serving the community. And now most of you are probably familiar with the beautiful facility on 17th Street in Harrisburg and some other locations. And Janine Peterson has been very instrumental in building that up. It's a state-of-the-art community facility, and I just commend her for all of her hard work and dedication. And I think it's important that we see, not only as a African American, but as an African American woman, all the obstacles that she has had to overcome and to press forward. And if any of you know Janine, she's a fighter, she's determined, she's a visionary, and she won't give up. And so she's taken this place to such a great, Harrisburg is a model for other communities and what can be done when a person has a heart and a desire and the support of the community to help to serve those who need medical assistance. So we just wanted to recognize her at this time, and I'll make sure she gets the award. I don't see her here. Brandon Flood is a young man that I met several months ago, and I was actually in Pittsburgh with him a couple of days ago. For those of you who don't know Brandon Flood, he's an awesome and inspiring young man. His story is very, very powerful. He formerly was a felon, and he told me he did about 9 years total incarcerated. And of course, he recognized that being incarcerated and making bad choices does not have to be the end of the story. And so Brandon, by his own description, pulled himself up by his bootstraps. He not only, after he got done, he got his record expunged, and now he functions as the Secretary of Pardons for the state of Pennsylvania.
Oh, yeah.
And he's doing a lot of important work in the community, not only inspiring young people that even if you made a mistake in life, that it doesn't have to be the end of the story, and the only limitation is what you do to limit yourself in this world. The other part of that is that he travels around and telling people how to get their record expunged, how to get commutations, also tells them about their rights as returning citizens, which is a great term for those who have paid their debt to society, but now they want to come back and to become productive members of society. And so just a phenomenal young man. Again, I would encourage you to get to know Brandon Flood if you get the opportunity. Very inspiring story, and just shows that there's no limitation to any of us, no matter what your situation or circumstances, no matter what the choices you make in life. There's always a chance for you to turn things around and to do phenomenal things in this world. And I love what Judge Morris said, that all of us are 1 in 400 trillion. Anyway, so we're all a star in our own, just by our identity of being born as a human being. You are a miracle. And so just appreciate both of those. Wanted to recognize them and encourage you guys to reach out to them and find out about their inspiring stories as well. Thank you.
Let me thank you, and we hope that they will be blessed and honored by being recognized as unsung heroes. God bless you.